China has disrupted global markets by linking its digital yuan with cross-border payment systems in 10 Oceanian countries and 6 in the Middle East, allowing nearly 40% of global trade to bypass the US-controlled SWIFT network. This move aims to establish a financial framework independent of the West and expand the global influence of the yuan, shielding Beijing from dollar volatility and US sanctions. Strategically taken after President Trump imposed new tariffs, China's action represents a strong rejection of US economic dominance. Stay ahead of the curve with the latest in tech. Subscribe to Data Dollar now and never miss an update on the innovations that are shaping the future of business and technology. Join our community. In 2022, trade between China and ASEAN reached $975 billion, a 120% increase compared to 2013, solidifying ASEAN as China's top trading partner. With the digital yuan already circulating in ASEAN and the Middle East, the global economy may soon reduce its reliance on the US dollar. Meanwhile, China's $2.6 billion investment in ASML lithography equipment in 2023 was nullified, signaling a break from Western tech giants like ASML and TSMC. Beijing's message is clear. It is ready to move forward independently and in its own interest. The US pressured the Dutch government to revoke export licenses for key DUV machines, freezing $15 billion worth of equipment in China. In response, China launched a strategic restructuring of its semiconductor industry, investing over $75 billion and hiring 50,000 engineers, including talent from companies like Huawei and SMIC. In just 3 years, the country has created an almost self-sufficient chip supply chain, achieving in months what was initially projected to take a decade. Today, China relies on domestically manufactured equipment for 60% to 70% of its needs, and its labs are developing both chips and design software. China is no longer just catching up, it is reshaping the semiconductor manufacturing landscape. In a surprising turn, it developed its own DUV lithography technology through Shenzhen-based SICAR, capable of producing chips under 7 nanometers, challenging the need for ASML's expensive EUV machines. The Huawei Mate 60 Pro's 7 nanometer chip, produced with this restricted DUV technology, stunned the tech world. SMIC's progress in 5 nanometer chip testing and the use of AI-driven techniques for 3 nanometer chip production highlight China's bold offensive to surpass its global tech rivals. The decision to cut purchases from TSMC and ASML caused a 27% drop in ASML's revenue in the last quarter, shaking Europe's tech sector. Beyond semiconductors, China's massive sell-off of US bonds and tech stocks like Apple and Nvidia is escalating tensions, transforming the conflict into a broader financial battle. If these measures destabilize markets, Americans could face higher mortgage rates, falling tech stocks, and losses in retirement funds. The chip war has evolved into a battle for economic power and global influence. China's so-called Dragon Valley is emerging as a new tech epicenter, with SMIC controlling nearly 20% of the global chip market, 4 times more than in 2020. As China redefines the semiconductor landscape, the future of everyday technology, from phones to cars, will increasingly be shaped by Chinese innovation and Shenzhen's DUV machines. In response to Trump's threat to impose a 50% tariff, China vowed to retaliate, likely raising tariffs on US goods, particularly tech products like smartphones and laptops, by 10% to 20%. Beijing, having already targeted $60 billion worth of US imports, including soybeans and cars, could now exceed $100 billion. The blow to US tech companies would be severe, as many depend on Chinese components and materials. China, which supplies 60% to 70% of the world's rare minerals, holds a critical lever in this tech war. These minerals are essential for manufacturing everything from phones to laptops. If Beijing tightens export controls, as it has before, US industries could face severe supply disruptions, higher costs, and greater dependence on more expensive sources, directly impacting production and consumer prices. Additionally, China could resort to non-tariff measures to pressure the US, such as stricter inspections that could delay up to 20% of US imports, especially food and pharmaceuticals. These disruptions would increase costs and strain supply chains. At the same time, Beijing could further devalue the yuan to keep its exports competitive, a tactic it has used in past trade disputes. If trade tensions escalate, China could allow the yuan to devalue by 5% to 10% against the US dollar to offset tariff impacts and strengthen exports to other markets. Meanwhile, Beijing is actively expanding trade with Southeast Asian nations and Belt and Road Initiative partners, reducing its dependence on the US. As a result, Chinese exports to these regions have already increased by 15% to 20%, a trend likely to accelerate. Beyond the economic arena, China is leveraging diplomacy to counter US pressure, strengthening ties through trade agreements with ASEAN, Russia, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. These alliances expand Beijing's global influence and diminish its need for North American markets. Meanwhile, Wall Street felt the impact, losing over 700 points in a single day amid growing distrust in Trump's economic management, even among his former allies. The stock market drop was driven by a troubling inflation report and tariff uncertainty. Larry Kudlow, once a strong defender of Trump's economic record, now blames taxes and inflation, but public confidence is fading fast, with rural unemployment rising and consumer confidence at multi-year lows. The economic consequences are becoming increasingly hard to ignore. Across the US, disillusionment is growing, even among Trump's most loyal supporters, in places like Wood County, West Virginia, where he received over 70% of the vote. Federal workers now face job uncertainty and express regret. Tension is palpable, and faith in Trump's promises is starting to crumble. One worker, in tears and fear, put it plainly, "I cried. It's really scary." Discontent is no longer confined to Democrats. It's spreading among former Trump allies, with protests multiplying across the country. Protesters accuse him of breaking key promises: cuts to Medicaid, reduced veteran benefits, and a higher cost of living, while billionaires enjoy tax breaks. In Pennsylvania, one protester summed up the sentiment: "We voted for America first, but now it's billionaires first." As economic frustration grows, Trump's foreign policy is also facing harsher scrutiny. J.D. Vance, a Trump ally, was detained in Greenland due to local opposition to Trump's foreign policies. Meanwhile, Canada has distanced itself from US energy commitments, choosing to align with Europe instead. China, for its part, is exploiting the situation to attract former US allies into its sphere of influence. The scandal over leaked military intelligence through the Signal app, implicating the vice president and top military officials, shook US politics. Even Fox News, usually a staunch defender of Trump, couldn't cover it up. Trump's silence worsened the crisis, as citizens face the direct consequences: higher food prices, more expensive healthcare, and rising taxes due to failed policies. Working and middle-class families, once trusting in Trump, now face a harsh reality. He has failed both economically and in foreign policy. A string of mistakes and his unusual silence have left him cornered. While conservative media circles the wagons around him, the big question remains: will the American people continue to believe in promises left unfulfilled? Trump is also considering imposing a 200% tariff on European alcohol imports, including wine and cognac. This measure could turn the most prized products of the old continent into bargaining chips in the growing trade war between the US and Europe. The president warned that if the EU does not revise its tariffs on US steel and aluminum, he will respond with 200% tariffs on European wines, champagnes, and liquors. The initiative aims to dismantle what Washington sees as unfair trade barriers. In 2023, the EU exported $13.1 billion worth of alcoholic beverages to the US, led by French wines. If these tariffs are applied, they would raise prices, reduce market share, and severely hit the European wine sector. The tariff could double prices for US consumers, significantly affecting producers in France, Italy, and Spain. Industry voices warn that exports could come to a complete halt under this threat. American consumers could turn to domestic alternatives, further reducing European market share. EU officials have pledged to protect their wine industry, harshly criticizing Trump's strategy and vowing to firmly defend their economic interests. The threat of a 200% tariff harms both the EU wine industry and trade relations between Europe and the United States. High-end French wines like Champagne would be severely affected by the cost increase, leading France to defend its interests vigorously. However, this situation also creates opportunities for American producers who could expand into the European market if Washington reduces internal wine tariffs, boosting regions like California and Texas, already familiar with European brands. If the EU maintains its tariffs, it will likely suffer a decline in wine exports to the US, while American producers could gain ground in Europe. As transatlantic tensions rise, the big question is whether the US will seize this opportunity or if the global wave of tariffs will ultimately hurt the broader economy. Canada, for its part, has already voiced strong opposition. Canada made it clear it will not yield. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England and prime ministerial hopeful, promised to resist any attempts to weaken his country. He sharply criticized the US strategy, stating that Canada's economy must serve its people, and warning that without reforms, more citizens would be left behind. Carney also revealed that he directly confronted Trump, rejecting any attempt to undermine Canadian sovereignty. The US president's rapidly escalating tariff policy has created global uncertainty and put thousands of jobs at risk. If you enjoyed the video and would like to continue learning about technology and markets, subscribe to Data Dollar and leave a like. See you next time.